All right. Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. This is Winslow Tech Talk, episode 2, navigating the cybersecurity maturity model certification. So, although it's not the most technical in nature, it certainly applies, and a lot of folks are working through the CMMC right now, preparing for one level of certification. We've actually been helping a couple customers on their CMMC journey, really even beginning towards the end of last year, which is really great. So before we get into it though, I do want to tell you a little bit about the Winslow Technology Group. So we are based out of Waltham, Massachusetts, so right outside of Boston. We do have offices in New York City and Charlotte, North Carolina. Our services, products, and solutions range from the desktop to the data center. So whether it's virtual, converged, hyper-converged, data protection, which is certainly a key component to cybersecurity, laptops, desktops, and then a whole suite of professional and cybersecurity services, including CMMC gap assessments and remediation capability to help you out. In addition to the data center, we also support different cloud solutions, whether it's public, private, hybrid. Maybe you need to secure like your AWS instances, or help with Azure Active Directory and some multi-factor authentication thing in that area. We're more than happy to help you in that area. When it comes to WTG, one of our kind of hallmarks or keystones is the game-changing technology area. So we do try to identify those and then develop a deep technical expertise in that particular technology domain. So while we aren't the people that say yes to everything, the things that we do say yes to, we are really, really good at and strive to be the best in that area. We're happy to do demos, proof of concept, support user groups, and at the end of the day, your level of customer sat is what is most important to us. We do have some industry recognitions, so I'll spend the next 75 minutes in going through each one of these. Just kidding. But know that we are recognized not just externally, by our customers for satisfaction, but in terms of different levels of status and in pretty great awards that we've won over the years, including like Arctic Wolf Alpha Partner of the Year last year. So that's like 2 years in a row we were Arctic Wolf Partner of the Year, which is obviously one of our core security partners. When it comes to cybersecurity and how we help our customers put together, a comprehensive cybersecurity plan, we actually use the NIST cybersecurity framework to inform our decisions and bring, an organized, comprehensive, cost-effective security program really to customers of almost any size. You have, words that are and concepts that are easy to articulate, all the way down at the engineering level, all the way to the top at your C level with, identify, protect, detect, respond, and recover. That kind of covers the area. So WTG has a bunch of products, services, and solutions that address these. So if you have any questions or whatnot, I'll talk a little bit more about our NIST cybersecurity assessment towards the end. So without further ado, we're here to talk about CMMC. So CMMC is the Cybersecurity Maturity Model Certification. It's a program put on by the DoD, or put together anyway by the DoD for new incoming contracts and to vet and understand like suppliers' capability. And so like why are we doing all this really? So I just love this quote. This is from the CMMC accreditation body's website. So the theft of intellectual property and sensitive information undermines our nation's defense posture and economy. Global costs last year are estimated at $600 billion, with an average cost per American of $4,000. Like, that's huge. So yes, it's time for action. So CMMC, and we'll go into a little bit more of like what it is and the whole notion of it, right? But who does this apply to first? So the CMMC applies to all contractors and suppliers conducting business with the DoD, Department of Defense. That includes primes, subcontractors. Maybe you're a manufacturer making like like a label that goes on something in the console of like an airplane, for example. Maybe you're a service provider providing, I don't know, some kind of technology services to the DoD, or some kind of just supplier. So all in all, there's over 300,000 organizations listed in the defense industrial base, which is really the DoD supply chain. So it applies to a bunch of people. You may in the past have been familiar with the NIST 800-171 framework and the self-audit requirements around that. So that's a good indicator whether it applies to you or not. So what is the CMMC? What really is it? So at the end of the day, it's a model. It's like a maturity model and a certification, but really a framework that is practices, processes, controls that really draws on some really great cybersecurity and process frameworks, including 800-171, 853, CIS controls, some different NIST publications, and just some other really great models and standards that are out there from existing frameworks. Not only does it provide control standards around like technical controls, but it also talks about process, and it incorporates a maturity level. So kind of a stage at which you're at, and we'll get into a little bit more about what the levels are, but that's definitely a key differentiator for CMMC when it compares to other standards, and even 800-171, for example. So like, why CMMC? Like, why couldn't we just stick with 800-171 and all the gap assessments and work that we were doing before? So there's probably one of the more famous kind of cases around this revolves around Aerojet, and I'll let you do the research and you can investigate a little bit about how all this happened. But some of it revolves around the way that 800-171 worked was it was a solid framework. There were no like different levels of it. It didn't go deep into that maturity kind of concept. But the key kind of like issue with it, if you will, was that it was self-assessment. There was no official certification. So folks did an 800-171 gap assessment, and then an organization would attest to being compliant to the 800-171 standard. And that led to a variety of non-compliance issues, including the one here. I'll let you look it up. You can do your kind of research on it. It's a pretty interesting one in terms of how it came to the courts, I guess. But again, I'm not an attorney, and I do not have the wherewithal to comment on that. But I love the quote on a website I came across that was kind of discussing some of the legal aspects of it. We knew this day would come. And for all the work that I've done in 800-171 gap assessments, and then the remediation work coming out of it, I could just see someone like self-attesting that they were compliant, and there was just no sense of certification. There was no independent audit that went there. So I agree. We knew this day would come. So let's talk a little bit about some of the timelines around CMMC. So when does it take effect? So January 31st, 2020, so very early this year, version 1.02 of the standard was released. It is on their website, and I do have some links at the end of this where you can pull up like the website and the accreditation body, things like that, for example. In April and May of this year, this was where the certified third-party assessment organization preparation began, or you'll see it abbreviated as C3PAO. And that was like forming the accreditation body and developing standards and prereqs and things of that nature to be able to certify folks to a CMMC level. So June 2020, which is where we are right now, this is when the CMMC may start to appear in different RFIs. We're also seeing like prereqs, application guidelines, fees, and different training requirements being published for the C3PAOs. In August and September of 2020, that's when, according to all documentation still, CMMC will start to appear in RFPs. And by fall of 2020, the CMMC will be in full effect. Now, I will say there is nothing overly public about it, but just to note, some of the timeline here may be shifted due to different COVID-19 situations and different public hearings that are going on. So just know that these still are the kind of dates in terms of when things are taking effect, but there could be some considerations with the timeline related to COVID-19. So when should you start? I would say like, whoa, wait a second, like you haven't started yet? So now is the time for you to start. I would say just based on my experience in 800-171 and helping organizations go through a gap assessment and then different remediation for that. And of course you could borrow on that for your CMMC level, but just knowing that it really takes, I would say like a good 6 to 12 months, depending on the level, your organization complexity, but like you're really looking at 6 to 12 months. So like at this point, this is great informational, but like you really should have started working on your CMMC now, or at least considering how you're going to borrow information from 800-171 or 853, some of the other standards that are out there, if you've done that work. So the framework itself is published. There's a couple ways you can download it on the website. Again, I'll provide the link towards the end. There's an Excel file you can get, for example, where you can kind of conduct your own gap assessment if you'd like. I often recommend that folks take like a cursory walkthrough and maybe do their own gap assessment just to kind of hit the low-hanging fruit, if you will, but then work with a third party to provide like a full CMMC gap assessment, because there may be language that can be interpreted in like a confusing sort of way, but to someone who's very familiar with 800-171, the language that was borrowed from different standards and incorporated into CMMC is a good way to work through that. So good news is if you were 800-171 or 853 or have ISO certification, you're already checking like a bunch of the boxes that may be included in the CMMC levels. I would say something to note here when we're talking about like the timeline before and the 300,000 plus number of organizations. So like just know this is like not going to happen overnight, right? So initially there's probably going to be like under 1,000 auditors that are going to be able to perform the certification. So you could just do the math, like 300,000 organizations certified with less than 1,000 to do it. Like this isn't going to happen overnight. So just know that you are empowered though to start the journey, right? The framework and the different models and everything are public, so you can even start by doing your own gap assessment. All right, so let's talk a little bit about the framework itself and the different levels, because this is like a key differentiator for folks that were familiar with maybe the 800-171 framework. And I'll lean on 800-171 because that was the kind of first iteration of something like this. So apologies if I keep referring back to it, but that's why. So the CMMC is really based in kind of these two tiers of processes and practices that align to call yourself like level 1, level 2, level 3, that sort of thing, right? So at level 1, from a process perspective, you can say like, what, we're doing these things. Like they may not be documented, but we're doing these things. And from a practices perspective, we'll call it like basic cyber hygiene. And what this aligns to is you are demonstrating an ability to safeguard federal contract information. So that's exactly from the CMMC model documentation. As you work your way up, level 2 is saying like, not only am I performing things, but I'm documenting them. And I have like an intermediate level of cyber hygiene. So I doubt you'll actually see level 2 listed in any RFIs or RFPs. Level 2 is a stepping stone to get from level 1 to level 3. And level 3 is where most people, I believe most organizations, I should say, will be at. So level 3 is demonstrating your ability to protect that CUI or controlled unclassified information, which was really the spirit of 800-171 and why that was launched. So at level 3, you're demonstrating from a process perspective that you're performing, documenting, and actively managing your cybersecurity processes. And then from a practices perspective, we're above basic and intermediate and into a category of what we would call good cyber hygiene. As we go from like level 3 to 4 and 5, that's really demonstrating your ability to not only protect CUI, but also to reduce the risk of advanced persistent threats, so APTs. And again, that's exactly from the CMMC documentation there. I think you'll find that most folks initially are going to be seeing like a level 3 requirement, and again, that aligns generally with what's in 800-171 today. So from kind of a focus perspective, right? You know, like the different levels, think of it as like steps. And again, this is borrowed right from the CMMC documentation. When we talk about, you know, your ability to perform from a process perspective, and then like a capabilities perspective, you have like the basic cyber hygiene. Like that's like, you know, the basic. Like this is like, you know, you can basically safeguard information. And again, as you're transitioning through the levels, you know, you're demonstrating both process and practice capabilities around the different areas. And again, just a reminder, like level 2 is really kind of a transitional stepping stone between level 1 and level 3, if you're interested there. When it comes to the different domains that are covered, and if you download the Excel spreadsheet that's on the site, you can see like all the domains listed there and the different categories with there. You can see how comprehensive this is. So earlier in this, I talked how Winslow uses the NIST cybersecurity framework to inform decisions and bring, you know, a decent level of cybersecurity, you know, to our customers. Certainly, there are more detailed frameworks like this, right? So in CMMC, it's not just, you know, protect, detect, respond, recover, that kind of thing. It's, you know, access control, asset management, like audit, accounting, like awareness training, what you're doing for configuration management, and so on and so forth. Like, do you have incident response capability? Do you have situational awareness of your environment? Like, what are you using to recover your environment? You know, process documentation. There's a whole bunch that goes into this, and it's certainly more detailed than like that NIST cybersecurity framework that I talked about. But at the highest level, these are, you know, the CMMC domains, and the different levels and what you need to achieve within these domains are documented in that Excel file that align with, you know, the levels that we talked about it just in the previous slide there. So I figured like that's like an overview of CMMC. Like there's tons of information on the web about it. So I figured we have like limited time today. I want to save a little bit of time for a Q&A at the end. So I figured like I just put together a quick FAQ for commonly asked questions that we see or which has kind of come up a lot. So FAQ 1, like what does this cover? Like what's it all about, right? So very similar to 800-171. This covers CUI, so controlled unclassified information. But unlike 800-171, all organizations doing business with the DoD will likely need some level of certification level, certified being kind of the key word there. Just a little tip I'd say too, as you're reading the framework and going through it, because this is kind of another area that comes up often, and this is related to CUI. So if you were not necessarily familiar with CUI or how some of this stuff is written, right, you may see you know, references to privileged access in there. And when we talk about privileged access, that's not like I'm an admin. I mean, it is, but it's not like privileged access is really talking about access to or potential access to CUI. So like from a technical perspective, like where's one area that comes up? Multi-factor auth. Like, so you may have a requirement or you may interpret a requirement to say like, I need to provide multi-factor auth to secure access to privileged, you know, information, something like that. In that case, it's not just securing like admin accounts with multi-factor auth. You may need to secure like user accounts also that may have access to that type of information. So I just kind of made that up, but that's just kind of like an example of that, just a tip as you're, you know, considering what this covers. So question number 2, will this be used by non-DoD government contracts? So the simple answer to this as of now is no. So at this time, CMMC is really only geared towards the DoD. But anecdotally, I'll say, like, I think, you know, as we see, you know, other organizations, observe how this certification process and body works, and the levels of cybersecurity that we're seeing on a more structured fashion, it will trickle downstream, and other government and probably non-government organizations will have some sort of a certification body that aligns with something similar. 3, is this the same as 800.171? So I brought up 800.171 a whole bunch of times in this presentation because it's probably the closest thing that generally aligns with this. Not maybe from a standard perspective, but from a practice and implementation standard, and in its relation to DoD contracts. So the answer is no, it is not. I think we've really talked this one through quite a bit. The CMMC is a combination of several frameworks. 800.171 is included. What 800.171 was missing, the key thing, in my opinion, that it was missing was the provisions for like various levels of certification. So there wasn't like a level 1 800.171. It was kind of like I'm 800.171 or not, and I'm self-attesting to that. And obviously there were some legal issues around that. But so key difference there is 800.170. I'm sorry, CMMC has different levels of certifications, and there is a certification requirement. So if we talk about 800.171 and CMMC, like what would it generally align to? Like I said earlier, like 800.171 loosely would align to like level 3, but CMMC level 3 adds like about 20 additional processes to that. I would say that organizations that were compliant with 800.171 are likely already able to comply with at least level 1 of CMMC. So when we're talking about like when's the time to get started and like how far along your process are you, that may help inform where you are in the process, but certainly not in place of doing any kind of gap assessment or determining like I'd say or determining which level you're targeting along with that gap assessment. So question number 4, are the results public? So you run through like a gap assessment and an audit, like are they going to publish your security vulnerabilities like on the web? Like I would be concerned about that too. I think that's a good question, and that actually is addressed in the FAQ that's on their site. So the answer to that is the only information that will be made publicly available is that you are CMM certified or you've been through the CMM certification process. That's kind of the only publicly available information. The results of a CMMC assessment will not be made public, and all signs indicate, and everything I've read so far says like even the certification level that you've achieved will not generally be made public or not be made public at all. The DoD though will have access to all the company's certification levels. So it's not clear as to like whether they'll have access to like complete audit details. I doubt they will, but they will likely have access to the like actual certification level, which would not necessarily be made public. And then 5, these efforts are expensive, right? So there is an expense in the gap assessment, and then there's considerable expense in the remediation part, whether it's because you have to buy equipment, hire consultants, do whatever you need to do. There's certainly a cost associated with the gap assessment part, and then of course the remediation. So are these costs reimbursable? So yeah, again, good question, right? So I actually had a hard time on nailing down some really specific information about it. So there actually used to be an answer on the CMMC public FAQ about this, but I don't see it there anymore. So you're more than welcome. I'll share the link. Tell me if I'm wrong, but like I don't see it there anymore. But if you take a look at different publications in the past and quotes from different areas, like CMMC prep is an allowable cost and reimbursable by the DoD. This was briefed, by folks at the end of 2019 in kind of a Q&A fashion. Here's a source at the bottom there in terms of making this like an allowable cost and reimbursable under certain circumstances. So I don't have like a perfect answer there, but a good question, and this provides like a little bit of guidance around that. So a couple of useful links. So this link here is the is the site for the CMMC framework, the public FAQ, and some other really great information, including that Excel spreadsheet that that talks about you know, like the individual levels, and maybe if you wanted to conduct kind of your own internal CMMC gap assessment ahead of a more formal CMMC gap assessment and remediation project, that's a great place to get started. Ton of useful information there. And the formed CMMC accreditation body, so cmmcab.org is the site for that. And there's a lot of information there around accredited folks that can conduct, so that the C3PAOs like that can conduct you know, the certification itself, and kind of like where they are in the process too, because that's still obviously a moving target, and we're just coming out of May and into June. Okay, so I'm gonna open it up to Q&A in just a minute. I don't know, Lori's actually moderating this. Thanks, Lori. But before we get into the Q&A, I do want to say for folks that are interested in CMMC and they're just interested in frameworks in general, you know, WTG, we don't offer a free CMMC assessment, obviously, because there's a considerable time effort there, but we do offer kind of a no-cost risk assessment. So it's based on the NIST cybersecurity framework. So it's kind of an open offer. If you're interested, you can just email webinars@winslowtg.com, and we're more than happy to run through at least a NIST cybersecurity framework. Even if it's not useful to you, if it's useful to another organization that you're working with, or you know, close colleague, something like that, feel free to refer it, and we're more than happy to do that for you. Then I'll open it up to Q&A. In just a second, I'll check the chat window and see where we're at there. For future webinars, just visit winslowtg.com/events, and you'll see like all of our events and webinars there. Feel free to again to sign up there. And if you have any questions, want any kind of follow-up, or you know, want to do one of the NIST cybersecurity framework assessments, feel free to drop an email to webinars@winslowtg.com, and we'll get you started with what you need there. So with that, I'll open it up to any questions that we have out there. Okay, I don't see any coming in at this time. So I guess with that, I'll say thank you all very much for attending. If you have any further questions, feel free to follow up with us at webinars@winslowtg.com, and I'll let you go. Have a great day. Thank you, everyone.